Unanimous, yes. Mr. Miller.
I don't have any items, Mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Shirley.
Nothing here, thanks.
Greg, are you going to introduce the next multimodal?
Yeah, let me try to frame this issue, and we apologize because both of these studies are a lot of information, especially to the new council that hadn't been specifically engaged in the multimodal inventory regulations and audits that we are required to do pursuant to our agreement with the state. But you have basically two reports that were commissioned last year by the Renaissance Planning Group, and one of them addresses the multimodal transportation regulations audit. These are the things that we have put into place relating to multimodal to address the overall transportation needs in the city. In addition, we have provided you the copy of the Harbor District parking study that attempts to look at it comprehensively, the parking analysis parcel by parcel, and whether or not there's any shortages and so forth. So it is a lot of information. I know you are scheduled for your June 9th workshop as relates to the comp plan. This is, at least in my opinion, the multimodal is in part and parcel to the land development code as well as the comp plan. So you may want to take this under advisement. We do have individuals here from Renaissance that can address any specific questions you might have. We had received some comments from some of the elected officials relating to impact fees and the collection of impact fees and whether or not those impact fees were designed to offset the cost of the impact that particular project has or building has on the city. And it was probably done 6-7 years ago. The impact fee update was done. At the time, the city council elected to reduce the impact fees and reduce the fees collected. Those things that, again, you may want to look at as tools in the toolbox, but again, however you want to approach it, we can go through it line item by line item, or we can handle any questions you may have. And again, we do have individuals from Renaissance here that can address any specific questions you might have.
I think we're going to need to take a 5-minute break to change the tape. Is that right? 5 minutes? 30 seconds. Okay. Did we excuse you all? I said, we excuse you all? I called the meeting back to order. I didn't call it out of order, but we'll start again. Is someone going to approach the microphone for questions, or are we going to do this generally?
He's sitting here.
Okay. Discussion.
I noticed there's reference to the comprehensive plan in this, and I'm just wondering, was this the one that we just submitted, or was it a prior version?
It's a 2010 comp plan.
So I wonder then, how much of a difference is it going to make when you factor in the fact that some of the comprehensive plan elements have changed?
The transportation element of the comprehensive plan, Chapter 8, has not changed that much from 2010 to 2020. And if anything, it's more refinements. And the implementation of the multimodal is really more in the Land Development Code, which will be coming up in coming months.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, we got this on Thursday, and I did read over this, but I did not read it like I would like to be able to read it and be able to ask questions. And I don't know, sir, where you're from, but I don't feel prepared to talk on this tonight. I'd be glad to sit here and listen if anybody else has questions about it, but I just don't feel like I'm prepared to talk about this tonight and the parking thing either, to be able to take all that in. But I did read it, but I didn't read it like I want to read it.
It is a lot of information. It's very complicated information. There's no doubt about it. It's something you need to read 2 or 3 times, ask questions after you do that. And even though those of us been involved in it, is just not an easy subject to digest, or subjects to digest.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very difficult read. Councilmember Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. Are we still the only city in the state of Florida to adopt a multimodal transportation district?
You are not. There's a few communities. Kissimmee is continuing their MMTD. I know for a fact.
Okay. Is it working for them?
Yeah, I mean, the function is still exists. They've made the choice, as you have, to continue with transportation concurrency under that policy.
Well, I've spent the last 3 months living with our current comp plan, looking at the old comp plan. The multimodal transportation district gave us maximum parking allotments or allowances for parcels that wanted to be developed, not minimums. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why do we have maximums?
The intent of the maximum parking and the intent of the MMTD as a whole is to move to alternative modes to auto. So that is one of the strategies in an MMTD as you progress out of auto as the primary choice. You obviously need less parking, and also it adds the urban form factors that create a pedestrian-friendly community are consistent with reduced parking.
And I see that second part, but the reduced parking, just denying people parking spots, I don't know if anybody has, well, I know everybody has met the type of folks that come to visit Destin. They come because they've driven here, and just because we're denying them parking spaces is not causing them to ride a bike. That's my biggest struggle, is if we were thinking that we were going to just make everybody start walking and using bikes because they could park their cars across the street on the north side of 98, and we were going to build a parking deck that we did, or parking decks that we didn't build, and I don't know, it just seems very half-baked that the motivations for why people might want to use non-auto means of transportation could somehow be linked to a lack of parking. It spills out, and now we've got problems at the Emerald Grand with pedestrian traffic. People are getting hit, and at the end of the day, the Emerald Grand and other parcels are going to be looked at from a maximum amount of parking rather than a minimum amount of parking, and I don't think that accomplishes necessarily what we're trying to do moving forward. I think this is something we really need to look into. I know that we only got this parking study on Thursday, but it's something that I think all of us on this council need to digest thoroughly, because it's an integral part of what we're going to try to accomplish on the 9th, in my opinion. And if it's not compatible in a real meaningful way, I'm wondering why we have it anymore, because it just seems, I mean, I saw the Baby Grand was going to be talked about today, so I went and walked around on the Emerald Grand property today, just get the lay of the land. And they were required to give bike parking, bike racks. none of them are being utilized, and every single one of their parking spots is loaded up. I mean, it's disingenuous to believe that a family of 4 from Memphis that comes to visit here is somehow going to want to use, they love their cars. We're Americans, and I think people in the Southeast love them even more. I just think it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if we're giving people credits to shove them to the north side of the road, all of this at a very philosophical, high altitude standpoint, I'm not sure if it still makes sense, if it ever made sense. So this is something we really, really need to dig into, because I'm going to be bringing it up and discussing it on June 9th. So yeah, I'll yield the floor to anybody else who still has comments, thoughts.
Councilmember Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that whole multimodal was put in effect when the Emerald Grand was built.
It was put into effect when the 2010 comp plan was adopted in 2005. The Emerald Grand was approved under the 2000 comp plan. But
I think in his development, it gave him a 30% reduction in his parking because of the multimodal that we adopted.
In which, the Emerald Grand or the
Emerald Grand.
I don't think so, because it was approved in 2002.
I'm almost positive when I was reading over that development order, it gave him a 30% reduction.
Are you talking about the Phase 2 approval?
No, sir. I don't
Talking
believe,
about
I don't believe so.
The original approval or the
I think it was
Phase
the
2?
original approval.
Multimodal wasn't adopted until 2004, 2005, and it was part of the 2010 comprehensive plans, and the Grand was approved in 2002.
Somewhere I've read that it gave him a 30% reduction. I mean, does it not give anybody a 30% reduction in parking because of the multimodal biking, walking? Is that not why we adopted that, or?
Anything after 2005, 2004, yes.
The maximum reduction available under the multimodal is 20%, and there's quite a bit that the developer has to do to reach that 20% reduction.
It's 20%.
Still, that troubles me. Why are we giving reductions if it's true that parking is at such a premium? And I just don't believe that there's a direct connection between reducing parking spaces and getting people to get rid of their vehicles.
That was my whole thing when I brought it up, Mr. Destin, that it gave a reduction in parking, but we don't have the right-of-way on 98 to put in 10-foot wide sidewalks to meet any criteria of this multimodal. That we're doing it back here on Kelly Street and Legion. Really don't need it. We need it up there on the highway where it's supposed to be, but we're giving all these people a reduction on their parking. If we don't have enough parking to start with, we don't have the land to put any sidewalks on unless we use our 100-foot right-of-way we have and shrink the sizes of the road to accommodate that.
Well, in 2004, 2005, that was the policy direction that the city moved away from the traditional parking concurrency and all that to the multimodal. And as Mr. Destin said, if you want to shift away from that, during your discussion on June 9th, that would be the appropriate time to discuss it, both the pros and cons, because there is some cons to it, because it does, shift. That is a pretty dramatic shift. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It is a shift from where you've been over the last 10 or 12 years.
Mr. Foreman?
I agree with Mr. Destin's logic on that. I think by, taking away parking spots, you're not improving the situation. But the thing is, I don't believe that we've maximized the parking in the city to the degree that we could. I think, for example, I've mentioned before the under the bridge, and then allowing parking on Seibert and on that side that would relieve some of the stress that they're having in trying to get cars on the south side of 98. So I think there is some room to maneuver there. I think multimodal was outgrowths of concurrency, where you had to have, if you went to a certain level, you shut down development, period. And we were already almost at the end when this was done. And when you shut it down for everything, not just for the tall buildings, but the small buildings. And so there's a lot of involvement in this that I agree needs looking at. So,
Mr. Dixon?
Yes, I was just going to agree with Mr. Destin. I think this does need to be looked at. I have certain concerns with the multimodal plan. I've raised those concerns since I've been on here, and those is basically, having 10-foot sidewalks in areas that really don't need it, but we have to do that because in order to stick with our multimodal plan, and I think there's a lot of things that can be looked at with this and still provide plenty of walking and riding bicycles and space, but maybe not in giving the businesses the credit for this multimodal parking and things like that. So I'm in full agreement with what you're saying. So just to let you know.
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, I think there's certain areas in town where the multimodal actually works. On Holiday Isle, for one, when I opened a new business there, I had to get my parking lot up to code, and we were allowed to do golf cart spaces, bike racks, and our bike racks are actually used on Holiday Isle. And one of the reasons why is because people don't fear for their lives when they are pedestrians on Holiday Isle. If you're a pedestrian on 98, you're crazy. It's just dangerous. And it's because of our sidewalks. So I understand why you want to allow multimodal credits on 98. We have plans. We don't have the money to improve 98 for pedestrians. If that plan were in place, I think it would. We don't encourage pedestrians on 98 where we're given the credit. So I agree. It's kind of backwards logic there. But I think if you make the improvements to 98 that we need to make, I think those credits would start to make sense. But we're not there yet. I think if you look at 30A, all the bikes out there, people do use bikes to avoid traffic. They just don't in Destin because it's really not logical. It's not safe. So, but I do agree. I think on Crystal Beach and Holiday Isle, they are more pedestrian friendly. So I can see where it would work out there, but definitely not a 98.
Mr. Marner?
Thank you, Mayor. If y'all will recall, on 98, when the state starts the process from Marla Bridge to Airport Road, part of that effect is that they're going to reduce the size of the lanes of about 6 inches to 1 foot, plus the median, to add more sidewalk on the sides of those streets to give for part of that multimodal. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll be corrected on that. The other thing is the multimodal also takes into effect, I believe, the parking garages that we promised during the Harbor CRA process that we would build on the north side of the highway to get people to park on the north side and walk across the street pedestrian friendly, which is again also part of what we're doing with the 5 crosswalks we're trying to put in. So that I don't want to take away our ideas of being able to put the parking garages in that we need to help alleviate a lot of that parking and get more people out there to walk safely across Highway 98.
Mr. Dixon? Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Mr. Destin?
Yeah, and I don't hate the multimodal plan. I just don't know if the reduction in the South Harbor District of parking for the south parcel owners made a whole lot of sense. And I don't disagree. If there is the demand for a parking garage and we can alleviate some of the overflow traffic spilling out into the neighborhoods, great, that's good. But I can't see a causal connection between the reduction in parking for the southern parcel owners necessarily forcing people across to go use your parking garage. You just build the parking garage They were already short parking in 2003 when you talked about that. We had reached the cap. And my concern is multimodal was just, it appears, an easy way to keep rubber stamping more development when we didn't have the parking by saying that, no, they're going to come on bikes and they're going to come by foot. And now we're reaping the harvest of that. We can't, it's gridlocked in the 100 days of summer and even right now. So, and you know, multimodal makes sense in a lot of parts of Destin, and parts of it makes sense in the South Harbor District, but I don't think reduction in parking makes sense on the south side of the harbor to promote foot traffic and bicycle traffic. And that's kind of where my beef is for right now. But I think it's an important thing we all need to look at, and so I'll yield the floor, and we can probably get out of here pretty soon.
Any further discussion? I do have one member of the audience, Mr. Perry. On the front of it.
Yes, Claude Perry, 732 Harbor Boulevard, and I own property on the harbor at 300 Harbor Boulevard. I think where you maybe are missing an important ingredient as to why we took on the multimodal is like Mr. Barlow just said. The idea was to, and the previous councils have agreed and promised the property owners who participated in building the boardwalk that if the easements were given and the boardwalk was built, that there would be 3 parking garages built to support the additional traffic that was coming to the harbor to enjoy what we all wanted, a successful harbor walk. So to me, it is has been successful. It's going to be even more successful, in my opinion. It's a wonderful addition to the city. It is. Some people think it's the gem of the city. You know, I think we have a lot of gems, and as we all know, people are going to come by car. And the idea was that you would park your car in a parking garage and walk across 98 safely and enjoy the entire boardwalk from one end to the other. And that's why the council said have 3 equally distributed parking from Benning to the bridge. So the other facet of this was to encourage other modes of transportation, whether it's walking or whether it's bicycles or whatever. But boating, people are begging for a place to dock their boat to come to the harbor walk, and there are no docks. Those people would come and leave their car at home. That's part of the multimodal. So to me, it's been successful, and to tamper with this would be a very serious mistake. If you remember and think about it, there is I don't know what the word is, insert into the parking lot for a transit stop. And we were going to have trolleys. Now, for some ungodly reason, we've got trolleys running from 90 miles an hour down 98. They don't stop anywhere. And they go from the bridge all the way out to the end of Noriega Point, turn around, and then go 90 miles an hour back to toward the bridge. So I think there's even one trolley going all the way to Walton County, for crying out loud. A Okaloosa transit bus. But the idea was we'd have a transit bus doing a loop through the harbor, picking people up that were parking in the parking lots. So now, don't misunderstand me. I'm for underground utilities. I'm very much for the underground utilities. But the council promised the property owners that they were going to build these parking garages. So to me, if you're not going to build the parking garages, Mr. Destin's theory is correct. Do away with the multimodal, because without the parking garages, it will not be successful. Now, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe any action is required on this. We'll bring it back up at the workshop. Any
I'd like to
further
address
discussion?
just one brief point Mr. Perry brought up. I'm not for getting rid of multimodal, but there's a portion of it, the reduction in parking, that I don't think necessarily, I want to build the parking garages, they make sense. But before multimodal was implemented, they were short parking already. And the theory was, let's give them a reduction in parking and that'll force them into the garages. If you were short parking before, that should have already forced them into the garages. Right now, the Marlar parking lot doesn't, or I'm sorry, the Marlar Street parking lot doesn't get utilized very much. So my concern is, if let's build some parking garages, but it may not make sense over at the Marlar parking deck. Let's talk about perhaps on Cybert. But that's the reduction in parking is my only issue. We need pathways. The only way we can get people to move towards multimodal is for them to want to not be terrified, like he said, to be able to come by foot or by bicycle. And that's going to come through green space, and that's going to come through widening, slowing down traffic and widening the sidewalk. So I'm not throwing the whole thing out. There's that section just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
And why the reduction for multimodal certainly doesn't help our parking problem. I think going into the June 9th meeting, what I would ask a couple of y'all to look at, or all of y'all, Margaritaville was permitted with 18 spots because of the outdoor dining loophole. Harry T's. What about Margaritaville?
I don't know what that number is, but it's all impacted.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at ways of alleviating the problem, I think it's twofold in my opinion. One is what Mr. Destin's talking about with the multimodal credits, and secondly, how are we opening up these big restaurants and permitting them for 18 spots? It's an outdoor dining loophole, which defies logic, because when are people using outdoor dining? In the summer, when we're busiest, when we have the biggest burden on our parking. So I would look at that, and I'll certainly be addressing that on June 9th.
You're finished, Mr. Destin. Any further discussion? Moving right along. Request for an RFP, city manager search and recruitment process. Mr. Casella, do you want to?
Yeah, Karen's coming up, but this is basically pursuant to your direction at the last meeting. Karen has drafted up a request for proposal for the solicitation of your new city manager. So, Karen, you want to lay that out for him?
Sure. Good evening. Before you, as recommended, the RFP for the city manager search and recruitment process. This was reviewed by the bid committee on the 11th, and there was some minor changes, but they approved it. So pretty much it outlines what would be required of the potential firms that will be contacted, and the advertisement to give us a comprehensive list and timeline to include dollars. And so, as I said before, it could be a potential of between $18,000 and $25,000, but, we're hoping to get a lot of bids, requests back, and hopefully keep that number down. Those would be, once they've come in, I believe they've got till June 9th to respond, so we would look at those at that time. I would provide you a list of firms that responded, and hopefully by that next meeting in June. It's a short period of time, so I'll be working diligently to get that to you, but that's the best that I have for you at this moment.
Mr. Mayor?
Do you have any questions?
Yes.
I'd like to make a recommended motion. I would like to recommend approval of RFP for professional search firm services by the city council for the city manager position.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Morgan seconds. Discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. If Ms. Lejeune is a good fit, do we need to go through the process to satisfy legalities or requirements, or could we forego this process?
We're not legally bound to award any bid or anything that comes forward. It's completely up to council's wishes. The timeline of things, like I said before, it might be, we might be down that road a little bit, but, you guys have the opportunity to, as a council, tell me the direction of what that you'd like to go.
I have a question, but I'm not sure. Do we need to go ahead and approve this in the event we do need to award a bid, or, put it on hold? I'm not really sure how to phrase what I'm thinking.
Well, my recommendation would be to go ahead and move forward with this. There could be a lot of things that happen between now and then. What would happen potentially, I'd work with the city clerk's office if in the event that the elected officials decide not to actually go forward with the bid. So if I start to get proposals actually in from firms, and then different direction has been provided, then I'll work with Ray to contact those individuals and say, it's been decided that we're going a different route, but we're not legally bound to award anything.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, I may have not understood what Ms. Ramsell was saying there just a minute ago, but the last meeting that we had that we discussed this, it was basically voted on that we were going to, let's say voted on, I think it was voted on, that we were going to move in this direction, but then we were going to allow, because I do know that came up for a vote, as to whether or not we would allow the interim city manager to apply for the position. And so, I think that we're going to need to, even Ms. Lejeune comes in and does a jam-up job, I think we need to make sure that we're getting the right person for the position. So I'm all about, if nothing else, making sure. And, I don't want to settle for anything less than the best. And so I think with this is the only thing this is doing is to actually try to choose a recruiting firm that we would like to work with, so if we should need to. But we did hire this person as an interim city manager, so I think it's our best is that we can go out and take a look at and see what's out there. So, just an opinion.
Thank you. Councilmember Foreman?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the problem we've got is the timing of all of this. The fact is that Ms. Lejeune comes in and she's doing a good job, and we've made the decision that she should be included in the process at some point in time. But once we've gone the direction of finding a search firm, and they're already working on this and providing us with input on it, it's a little late to decide we're not going to use them. I mean, you're still going to be billed for it. So the thing about it is, I think my preference would be to say up front that she would be included in those being considered It's final. Yeah, okay. I just want to be sure of that,
I
because
hope so.
otherwise,
I
yeah.
expressed that when I negotiated
Yeah,
a contract with her.
I wouldn't want to.
If I may as well, if at that point where we already have a recruitment firm selected and she's doing a good job, we can also, you know, if the council wishes to add her to that short list, because potentially we could have 100+ individuals apply. So if she's doing a good job, you could elect to put her onto that 10 or 8 or so and put her on that short list as well as an option.
Councilmember Marler?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to go into detail how this whole process could have been avoided. That's a bridge that's already been crossed. However, the one thing that I do want to stress is I don't want us to rush into this thing. If it takes us time, if Ms. Lejeune's here 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, it doesn't matter. If we're going to go and search for another city manager that fits the criteria that all of us on here in council want, if it takes, I hate to say this about the money, but if it takes the money and stuff, I don't want to shorten this process. I want to get the right person, the right position, no matter what, so that we don't have any situations like this again.
I don't see any further discussion. We have a motion and a second. Council ready to vote? No further discussion? We have a unanimous yes to issue the RFP. Mr. Casella, I think, do you have anything further for the council?
Just quickly, you've approved the interim city manager contract. Tammy will be, and the mayor mentioned to you about, she'll be here on Wednesday morning, but I think we're going to try to get her to Friday to have an opportunity to meet one-on-one with y'all. So if you're available for about an hour to talk with her and give her your insight. Then next week, she'll spend time working with the department heads and getting up to speed on all the outstanding issues and that's burning issues they have on their plate. The following week we do have 3 weeks between this meeting and your next meeting on June 6th. Will be agenda prep for the June 6th meeting. At that point, I anticipate having transferred her all of the knowledge that she needs to be able to function as the city manager, and would be completing my assignment at the close of business on June the 3rd. So that's the plan right now for the next 2.5 weeks to work through that. So, but we do plan to have y'all come in if you're available. I know Mayor Fisher will be out of town, but to spend an hour with her on Friday, to kind of go through and give her your thoughts about, what you would like to see her working on as she starts to hit the ground here over the next several weeks. The only other thing I have is that we do have the Food for Thought celebration at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. So if you're able to get over there and see the renovations to that building and what's been accomplished over the last 4 to 5 months, that would be helpful. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have to do all this on Friday? I mean, that's an awful lot for Ms. Lejeune to come in on Friday and listen to, for 7 hours, different council members. I mean, that's a whole lot for her to swallow in one day. Can we not do it like half us on Friday, another half on Monday, or?
I'll be there Monday.
Yeah, we can spread it about if we can. I mean,
That just it seems a whole lot, 7 hours in one day listening to everybody trying to swallow all that. It's going to be a lot.
I think we're only going to give you 10 minutes.
Yep.
So.
Thank you.
Would anyone in the audience like to speak before I close the meeting? Not seeing anyone. Any further business from council? Not having any. We are adjourned.